sat down with him. His name is Mark Boss, and he's sitting amongst you right now. And we were having a discussion because at his work, he was trying to reach people through his work, and he chose to have a Bible study. And so he was telling about this Bible study, and he was like, you know, there's some weeks there's this many, and some weeks there's this many. There's not a ton of people are showing up. And he's like, I don't really understand. He goes, but you know, I feel like I should keep doing it. I feel like I should keep doing it. So I was starting to ask him some questions about it. He's like, we have it like, you know, on this Tuesday, and it's at 5 a.m. He's like, do you want to come? And I was like, no. I don't want to come. There's not one part of me that wants to come to that. But through the Bible study, you know, he'd have 4, 5, 8 guys that would show up to his Bible study. He felt like, he said, I feel like there was something more. And so that led to a group starting through another gentleman that he works with side by side, which we all need to have that person side by side. And they started an outside group, a small group, if you would, Bible study, and it's in Mark's home. And so they meet every other Thursday, and it's just guys, and it's called Beer and Bibles. Now, some people will freak out when you hear, oh my goodness, you got to be kidding me. They're talking about having beer, and then they're bringing the Bible out, and someone's going to get struck by lightning, whatever it might be. I will share with you that the first time that I went, I put a hat on so that no one knew who I was. And I sat there, and I drank cream soda, because it looks like beer, so that I could fit in. I drink Mountain Dew, you can drink water, you can drink whatever you want. The beer is not the focus. The Bible portion is. And it was amazing how these guys were having great conversations, and we're discussing things, and nobody knew that I was the pastor at High Point. That was not discussed. In fact, the gentleman you're going to see here in a little bit, as he was doing things, I was throwing things at him because he was leading it, because it was more fun for me, and that way I fit in better. But we had some great discussions from it, and I mean, there's all kinds of great things that happen in that study. And here's the thing, it doesn't have to be beer and Bibles. They actually started another one, they called it, for the women, it's called Wine, Women, and the Word, but it doesn't have to be about that as well. I talked to a friend of mine who's a mechanic, and I said, you should call it Matthew, Mark, and the Mechanics. And if you're wanting to host a small group, because I think that's very important to have that, to be growing outside of here, because when you leave our church, it says you are now entering your mission field. So Brian and Mark now have grown to the point to where at their work they actually have their conference room to where they have a prayer time at their work. Their boss has allowed them to take that time for prayer. They fill the conference room because people need prayer. People are hungry for God's Word. And so Brian's going to come up and share a story because Brian wasn't always that way. In fact, he has a book coming out, and it's called Paralyzing Redemption, that's going to be coming out here probably about the next 4 or 5 months. But he's going to come up and share his testimony. So if you're someone today that's kind of stuck where you're at, maybe in neutral, maybe you're just not even close to God at all, once again, God's only one step away. So I would like for you to please welcome my friend Brian Ziegler. Brian.
I had this all set before I came in here, and then I messed it all up right beforehand. That's all right. Can you guys all hear me? Yeah. All right, good. Well, if you remember the last time that I was here, I said that you guys would probably be asking yourselves 2 questions. First, who the heck is this guy up here speaking? It's definitely not Pastor John. And the second question is, what's wrong with him? Why is he limping around? Is this Mike messing around with everybody? Are we still good? We're still good? Okay. Why is he limping around? Is there something that happened to him? So hopefully by the end of our time today, I will answer that second question for you. So first, a little bit about me. My name is Brian, and I am a church planner in Northeast Ohio. And I think what I love most about my job is doing exactly what I'm doing right now. And that's getting the opportunity to go to different churches, just like High Point, and share the good news of Jesus Christ. And any time that I plan a new church or I start a new group, I always encourage the leaders and the pastors to start in the book of Acts. Because I believe that there's so much that we can learn about Jesus through the Apostle Paul. So the Apostle Paul, he was a storyteller, and a great one at that. So every time he got the opportunity to grab the mic like this, he told the same story. He just would kind of tweak it a little bit to fit his audience. So that story, it sounds something kind of like this, right? So Paul would say, this is my life before I met Jesus. Right? I was this really high-ranking rabbi, this really important person. I was running around persecuting Christians, locking them up, throwing them in jail. And then I had this encounter with Jesus on the road to Damascus, and he completely transformed my life from the inside out. And this is my life now. I'm living and dying for the gospel. I'm an apostle to the Gentiles, and I'm taking God's message to the ends of the earth. So that's what I want to do today. I don't want to preach at you. I don't want to give you a sermon. I just want to share my story, which really isn't my story. It's God's story. I also don't want to be that guy that's standing up here that just talks about himself and sounds like he's boasting all the time. I don't want to be that guy, right? I rather want to boast in the Lord Jesus Christ and amazing things that he does through each and every one of us. So today is the celebration of Jesus. Amen? Amen. All right. So I grew up in a small town, not too far away from here, called Canal Fulton. And if you've never grown up there or don't know much about it, Canal Fulton is the kind of town that you read about in books. It's small. We left our doors open all the time. All our neighbors knew each other, which was a good and a bad thing. But people just genuinely loved and cared about each other. I was blessed because I had an amazing mom and dad who loved me and supported me and cared about me. They were my biggest cheerleaders. I have an older brother, Dave, who still lives in Canal Fulton, and I have a little sister, Kristen, who lives in Florida. But I think what I remember most about my time growing up in Canal Fulton was my friends. I had a group of 5 friends. We called ourselves the Fab Five, and we did everything together. Right? Our parents were friends, so we'd go on vacation together. We'd have sleepovers, and we'd hang out. But what we liked to do most was play sports. So if there was a ball or a bat or some kind of competition, we were all in. But we stayed tight all throughout elementary school, and then in junior high, and eventually up into high school. I don't know about you guys, but high school for me was a big transition, a big jump. I remember getting into high school, and there was all these people, and there was a lot of them, and they were all bigger than me. There were all these stresses, and right, there was girls everywhere, and it was just like crazy. But for me, I was blessed because I had an outlet, and I was blessed with the ability to play basketball. So as a freshman, I made the varsity basketball team down here at Northwest. I remember maybe the first or second week of practice. I had this great week of practice, and coach comes over to me, and he puts his arm around me, and he says, "Brian, man, you played great this week. I just want you to know that you're going to be starting next week." So panic comes down on top of me because I'm a 15-year-old boy. I'm about ready to start my first varsity game. So the day the game comes, I remember I was all in my uniform. That was like way too big for me, and I was all ready, and I was sitting there, and they announced my name, and I go out on the court, and I have the game of my life. 15 points, 7 steals. To make things better, my big brother gets the game-winning shot, and we beat Springfield right down there at Northwest. It was great. I remember going home thinking to myself, this is how it's supposed to feel. And then I go home, I go to bed, I wake up the next morning, I come upstairs and I look at the newspaper. And then on the front page of the newspaper, I read that the headline, it says, "Brothers dominate, Northwest win." So I remember at that point, being a 15-year-old kid, my head starts to swell, my ego is huge, and I can remember back to that being a pinpoint of my life where I began a love affair with myself. This kind of continued on all throughout my sophomore year and my junior year, and ultimately into my senior year. By the time my senior year rolled around, it was time for me to make a decision on where I was going to play basketball at for the next 4 years. So I've been traveling around, and I went to all these different colleges, and I had a list of about 10 or 12 schools that I was going to choose from. There was a problem, because in high school, I cared more about the high than the school. So I cared more about the basketball, the hanging out with friends, the girls, the partying. I cared more about the high than the school. So when it was time to make that decision, I was ineligible to play at a Division I school out of high school. So we did a lot of talking to coaches and talking to other people. And we decided the best thing for me to do was to go play 2 years at a junior college and then transfer to a 4-year school. So we looked around and we decided that for the next 2 years I would be going to Edison State Community College in a small town called Piqua, Ohio for the next 2 years. So I remember at the end of my senior year, at the end of that summer, we packed up my 1990 white Ford Taurus, packed that thing to the brim, and we headed off to college. Now there were some good and bad things about going to Edison. First thing, it was 3.5 hours away from Canal Fulton. I remember just getting there. The first day I was getting there, I looked at the college and it was so small. In fact, it was so small there were no dorm rooms. So all of the athletes that came to Edison, they got their own apartments. So 18 years old, I had my own apartment. So you know the story's going to end badly. So eventually later on that day, my roommate Jamie came in and I met him. Jamie was this enormous 6'6", awesome basketball player from Crestline, Ohio. And I am convinced that God sent this man into my life to make sure that I wouldn't starve, because I had no idea how to cook, how to clean, how to do laundry, but he knew how to do all that, so he taught me all that. There were also 2 other basketball players who lived in the same apartment complex. We all became really close really fast. We kind of fell into a routine, and we would go to school all day, we would come home, then back to practice, and we would just hang out the rest of the night. And at first that's what it was. It was innocent enough, we were just hanging out. But eventually, a couple of the guys, they had fake IDs, and they introduced alcohol into our hangout time. And at first we kind of convinced ourselves that it was no big deal. It was only a couple beers. But a couple beers turned into 6, and then 6 into 8, and then so on and so on. Before you knew it, we were introduced to hard alcohol and drugs and girls and partying. And it was just a complete disaster that was going on. I mean, it was partying every night. We were getting in trouble with the police. It was like I was trying to, so dark in my life, I was trying to plug all the holes. I had all these Jesus-sized holes inside of my body, and I was trying to plug them with anything that I could. Right? So that was the inside. The inside, it was dark and no light coming in. But the outside looked good because my basketball team was doing well. We set the school record for most amount of wins in a season. I was named to the all-conference team. I had a lot of schools looking at me. So the outside was looking good. So at the end of that 2 years, High Point, I was ready to kind of yank the cord out from underneath the wall, unplug, hit the reset button. So at the end of that 2 years, I came back here to Canal Fulton, ready for a fresh start. I'd only been at home for maybe a week. When I came from downstairs, I was sleeping. I came upstairs, and there was this little yellow Post-it note on the refrigerator. And it said, "Call Coach Hipsher." Now, Coach Hipsher was the head basketball coach at the University of Akron. Now, many of us that went to school or to college growing up, we probably all had like that dream school, like that one that we wanted to go to. It might be Ohio State or Alabama or Florida. But for me, it was always the University of Akron. So they called, and I got excited, right? I called right away, made an appointment, and the next day, I was on my way to meet this coach. And I remember it was this really long hallway, like about as long as this little walkway right here to his office. So I'm walking by the halls, looking at all the trophies. I eventually walk past the secretary, and I get into Coach's office. And I still remember, it's this black leather, really comfortable couch. And I sat down there and waited for Coach to come in. And he eventually came in, and Coach was a big man. He came in, he shook my hand, and he asked me 2 questions that I still remember to today. First question, he says, "Brian, you look like you're lifting. Your arms are getting bigger. Have you been lifting?" I I said, yeah, I have, Coach. Thanks for noticing. Then he said, can you still jump as high as you could? Can you still dunk? I said, yeah, Coach. I had this big smile on my face. I said, I can. And then he said the words that I've been yearning to hear for half of my life. He says, Brian, we know you can play. We've been watching you. We would love for you to come and join our basketball team immediately. Oh, that was it. Right? That was everything I had been working for so long. I had finally attained that goal. And I was excited. But there was one problem. Because I was transferring from one Division I school to another division school, I had to sit out a year. But I wasn't going to let that get the best of me. I had a plan this time. I was going to do something that I had never really done in my life before. I was going to get a job. That ought to help me pass the time. So I ended up landing this job working as a concrete laborer. I don't know if anybody's ever pushed concrete, but my job was purely to get in the trenches and push this concrete around for 8 hours a day. And it was good for me, right? There was a few good things in that. First of all, it kept me in shape. So I didn't have to worry about working out because I went home tired every day. Second thing, it gave me a lot of money. I made really good money doing this job. The third thing was it kept me out of trouble, at least for a little bit. See, this group of guys that I worked with, they were all much older than me. And they had a routine of their own. And their routine would be, they would work all day, and then they'd eventually get off, we'd go back to the shop, and they would drink. And they would drink heavily. And at first I told myself, no way, I'm not going back into that. And I've already been down that road, it turns out bad. But eventually, like anything, temptation got to me, and I gave in. And before you knew it, I was right back into where I was in college. We were drinking every night, we were doing drugs, we were getting into trouble. It was just this nonstop party. And I remember something was going inside of me. There was some internal battle going inside because I remember just being able to be, not even look at myself in the mirror, right? It'd be the morning time, you'd kind of brush my teeth, you kind of be looking at yourself, just with one eye, and I just remember not even being able to look at myself, not even able to stand myself. I thought about the things that I would do, that I've done the night before, and I'm so embarrassed. I was letting people down. I wasn't keeping my word. I was hurting people that were close to me. So one night, I don't know why this happened, but it was about 2 a.m. I had been partying the whole night beforehand, and I was laying in my bed. And for whatever reason, I decided that I'm going to have a conversation with Jesus, like a real conversation. I had grown up in the church, and I knew who Jesus was. The only time really I ever prayed for anything was to win a basketball game or to get out of trouble. Right? But this was different. I felt like I needed to do something because my life was spinning out of control fast. So I remember it was 2 a.m. I'm staring up at the ceiling, and I got myself out of bed that night. I got myself down on the ground next to my bed. It was just like this, and I remember looking up at the ceiling and just crying out to Jesus with everything that I had inside. I said, God, you're supposed to help people, and I need your help. I need you to make a change in my life, and you need to do it now. I give you permission, Lord, to make a change in my life by any means necessary, and you need to do it now. You ever prayed like this before, High Point? I call this dangerous prayers, because if you pray this way and you mean it, you better prepare, because God will show up, maybe in a way that you never expected. So let's fast forward 2 weeks down the road. It's now May 27, 2000. I just finished up working with my boss. It was a Saturday afternoon, and he said, Brian, do you want to go out to eat? Do you want to hang out for a little bit? I said, yeah, I do. And any time that we would say that, it was always code word for we're going to go out and party. And that's exactly what happened. So for the next 8 hours, maybe you're going through a divorce, or maybe it's a job loss, or maybe it's an illness. Whatever it is, I want you to know, God hears you. And I've been there. I know that pain. And all God wants us to do is call out to Him. And God is amazing. He's Abba. He's our Father. He's sitting there waiting for us, arms wide open, ready to embrace us. All we have to be willing to do is cry out to Him. And then be ready, because He'll answer those prayers, but it may not be in the way we ever expected. All right? So we're gonna go ahead and close here in prayer while the worship team comes up. I only have a few memories of that night. But I remember walking outside, and at some point it must have rained because the pavement was all wet. I remember the humidity. It was hot, muggy, and sticky. So I jumped into this soft top Jeep Wrangler that I ridden with my buddy, and I got in, and we started down Interstate 77. I remember it just being so hot that I rolled the window down. I remember the rain. The rain was coming down and kind of peppering and hitting the windshield. I can still feel it, and I can still smell it. We'd only been driving about a mile and a half before the driver of the vehicle loses control and slams into the guardrail. I wasn't wearing my seatbelt at that time, and I was ejected out of the side passenger window about 100 feet down an embankment and landed directly on my neck. Next thing I know, I wake up, and first thing that runs through my mind is, I don't want to get in trouble. I got to get out of here. So I went trying to run up the hill. I made it about 20 feet, hit the ground. So I jumped back up. This time, I only made it about 5 feet, hit the ground again. Now I try to jump up this time, and I can't move. And I start to float in and out of consciousness at this point. So I wake up, and I'm in the ambulance. I remember not knowing what's going on, but I was bleeding out of my ears and out of my nose, and I'm screaming at the emergency people. I'm saying, I can't die like this. Please, God, I don't want to die. So eventually they get me into the Altman intensive care unit, and they bring my family into this little room. And they tell my family, they said, your son's been in a terrible accident. We don't know if he's going to live or if he's going to die. But just to make sure, you better contact your local funeral home. Well, the next day, by the grace of God, I did make it through that night. And I had this doctor standing over top of me. And he was looking down at me, and he said, Brian, you don't happen to you. And I said, no, I'm ready to get out of here. I didn't say it like that. I said it with a little bit more colorful language. But he said, Brian, you have a broken neck. You're paralyzed from the neck down, and you'll probably never walk again. You're quadriplegic. So it was at that point in my life that every dream that I had for myself was completely thrown out the window. It evaporated, and it was gone. See, I had a plan for myself, High Point. I had a plan. I was going to finish up at Akron. I was going to go over to Europe and play professional basketball. I was going to make a lot of money, and I was going to come back somewhere and retire, someplace warm. Sounds like a good plan, right? Well, God had a different plan in store for me, a better one. So the next day they take me down to the emergency room and they do emergency surgery on me. They put in screws and metal and bone, and they fuse all this together in my neck. They sew me back up, and they ship me off to Metro Health Medical Center. And they basically say, good luck. There's a 90% chance that you'll be in that chair the rest of your life. I remember the first day I got at Metro Health. I got there before my parents did. They took me by ambulance. And when I got up there, I got to the 7th floor, the spinal cord unit. And I got up there, And I remember them wheeling me down this long hall. I looked, and everywhere I saw, people were in wheelchairs. And they were looking at me, and I was looking at them. And there was no happiness on this floor. I could feel the despair. I could feel the hopelessness. Everybody was sad. I was looking at them. They were looking at me. They were trying to figure out what was going on with me, and I, likewise, me with them. And they finally get me to my room. And I remember I was laying there all by myself in this dark room. I had no blanket on me. I was just laying in a pair of boxer shorts. I just remember weeping. I mean, just sobbing. I said, God, I did my part. You said we're supposed to pray when we need help, and I needed help, and where are you at? I was so angry with God. The next day, the severity of my injury really kicked in because I realized that I was completely dependent on, I was 21 years old at that time. I was completely dependent on everybody to do everything for me. My dad had to take me to the bathroom. My mom changed me. My nurses, they were the ones feeding me and dressing me. I'll tell you, after about 2 weeks, I had enough of this. I had enough of what was going on. I thought to myself, I don't want this life. I can't stand this life. And I was ready to die. But before, see, I was at this fork in my life in the road. And I decided I could go one or two ways. Before I chose that route, I decided to have one more conversation with God. And this wasn't a long conversation. And I never asked him to be out of this wheelchair. I never asked for complete healing. But I did ask him this. I said, God, will you give me just one small miracle, just something tomorrow to get me through this next day? Well, the next day I woke up, and my toe starts to flicker. The day after that, I wake up, and my foot starts moving. Then my knees start moving. And then my abs start to kick in. And then my arms are moving, and my fingers are moving. And before you know it, at the end of that 2.5 months at Metro Health, I was actually able to stand up and take a few steps. Now I wish, High Point, that I could tell you that this is the point in my life where the light bulb goes off, and I got it, and I understood what was going on. But I can't. In fact, for me, things when I got out of high school, or when I got out of the hospital, it got worse, much worse for me. Because now, I no longer have basketball in my life. Right? Basketball gave me a sense of structure, it gave me a sense of purpose, it gave me a sense of accountability. I no longer had that. Now I'm getting money from the government. Now I'm drinking every night. I'm doing drugs every night to mask the pain. Because I couldn't stand the life that I had. So this continued on really for the next 3 or 4 years of my life. And then one day, after some urging from a really important person in my life, I decided, for whatever reason, that I was going to go to church. So I woke up that morning, got myself up out of bed, got myself ready after a long night of partying, and I walked into this church. It was nothing like I ever expected. I saw this young man. He was up there preaching, and he had a Cleveland Browns jersey on. And he was preaching this sermon about community and discipleship. And it was like, you ever been in one of those sermons where you feel like the pastor's speaking directly to you? Well, that was this one. And I felt like God was in my ear the whole time saying, you need to go talk to that guy. You need to go talk to that guy. I said, really, a pastor? I don't want to talk to a pastor. But he's like, no, you need to go do that. So after church, I remember I limped up to this man. And I said, I don't know who you are, but I feel like God wants me to be around you. I braced myself for his answer. But he kind of smiled, and he looked at me. He said, okay, meet me tomorrow at Starbucks and bring a Bible. I said, okay, I'll be there. I went home, and I searched my house for a Bible to bring. The only one I could find was this old purple and pink Bible that an old girlfriend gave me a long time ago. But I didn't care what it looked like. So I grabbed this thing, and I went, and I met him the next day, and I remember I grabbed that Bible, and I put it down on the table. I said, teach me. So he opened up to the book of Matthew, and we begin in the gospel. And he taught me about Jesus. Now, I had heard about Jesus before, but he taught me about the real, true Jesus. And we talked about forgiveness, and we talked about God's love and community and what that looks like. And now, all of a sudden, I'm looking at this Bible, and the words are like, they're alive. They're jumping off the page. And all of a sudden, I'm starting to get it. And Jesus isn't just a person in the sky, but I'm falling more and more in love with him each and every day. But what I love about my friend Jason is that wasn't good enough for him, right? He's like, okay, we've got to that point. Let's go to the next level. He said, I have a ministry that I run in downtown Canton at a homeless shelter. He said, I want you to be there tomorrow. I said, no way. I'm like, I'm good with Starbucks. I'm hanging out talking about the Bible. There ain't no way I'm going to hang out at a homeless shelter. But he kept asking, and eventually I ran out of excuses. And I said, okay, I'll be there. I remember the first time I went down there, I saw homeless people, and drug addicts, and gang members, and prostitutes. And you know what? Those people became my friends. Some of them became like family to me. And those people, they taught me so much about Jesus, like the true Jesus Christ. Not the one we hear about in church, but the real, true, authentic Jesus. And they showed it to me. I could feel it. I could touch it. It was amazing. But even that wasn't good enough for Jason. He said, all right, we're going to keep pushing the limit here. Now, the next time that we show up here, you're in charge and you're going to be leading this thing. And I thought, oh, please, not this. But I did it. And I can tell you, the first probably 6 were a disaster. Like, I don't even know if we ever talked about Jesus, but I was in charge. That was the point. So I did that. And it was great. And God continued to work in my life. Then one day I was sitting in church, and the pastor was talking about Acts chapter 8, and they got to the part where Philip, this great evangelist, had an encounter with this Ethiopian eunuch, and they began to talk about baptism. And the eunuch asked Philip, he says, well, why can't I be baptized? And I thought to myself, well, how about me? Why can't I be baptized? And a couple weeks later, my church had a big baptism. And I decided that I was going to go ahead and do that. And I did, and I went and I got baptized. And I publicly declared in front of my church, in front of my family, my friends. And I gave my heart and I gave my soul publicly to Jesus Christ. And it was amazing. And it was finally at that point, high point, that the light bulb went off and things started to click. And I thought back to all those years ago when I was on my knees praying that God would make a change in my life, praying that he would answer my desperate prayers. It finally clicked to me that Jesus did hear me on my knees all those years ago, and he did answer my prayers, but he did it in the form of this wheelchair in that car accident. Because God knows us, right? He knows that we're weak, and I was weak. And as long as basketball was a part of my life, basketball would always be number one, and Jesus would be down on the totem pole. He knew that I needed to be rebuilt in his image. So life is a lot different for me now, 17 years later after my accident. First, one of the most important, is I got married to my beautiful wife, Susie, who's here in the audience. If there's one person, one sole person responsible for me being up here, it's her. When I met Susie, I was at my lowest point of my life, immersed in the drug and alcohol culture, and she just loved me. She never asked me to change. She never looked down at me. But I wanted to change because I thought so highly of her that I thought in order to be around her, I needed to change. So Susie, thank you for that. We have two amazing kids, Gage and Cayman, that you'll see running around here from time to time. Not too long after giving my life to Christ, we decided, well, how can we really like show expression of how much that we are thankful for what God has done in our lives, and in my life specifically. And I thought to myself, how about I push my body to the limits with a mountain climb? So we decided after talking to some guys that we were going to go to Peru and climb Machu Picchu, one of the 7 wonders of the world. So I did that. It was one of the most grueling things that I've ever done. But I ended up making it to the top of the mountain with some help from some of my friends. I remember one memory specifically that I have from that is if you go to Peru, anything goes, right? There's nobody that'll tell you to stay away from this part or go to this area. So I remember going off to the very edge of the cliff, and I could like see how far I was down. And I was sitting down, and I had my legs off the side of the mountain, just thinking to myself, man, this is about as close to heaven as I can possibly be. Then the next day, I got the opportunity to meet my Compassion International sponsor, child Rosa, who I had sponsored for a while. And I met her and her family, got to spend the day with them, and we went to the zoo, and we hung out. It was just an amazing time. Continuing to plant churches, continuing to disciple people, continuing to give sermons. I'm actually doing a wedding today after church as well. So God is just continuing to work in my life. Kind of consider myself a road pastor. Whatever He wants me to do, I just kind of go and do it at the time. And much to the astonishment of my 12th grade English teachers, I actually have a book that's coming out here. It is called A Paralyzing Redemption. You can find it on Facebook or Google or wherever you want to go. So God's really been working. But it's not all good. See, there is no cure for what I have. There is no magic pill that I can take and things will just get better for me. I wake up every day and I take 6 muscle relaxers a day just to be able to stand up. I have pain with every step that I take, and not just pain, it's excruciating pain that's not going to get any better. I have paralysis on my right side of my arm here. You can see my hand doesn't move. My leg doesn't work very well. I've got a lot of internal problems as well. I'm never going to have the opportunity to play backyard football with my son Gage. I'll never be able to run with my daughter Cayman. I'll never be able to go out in the ocean with them and swim around with them and just get to play with them. But I still wake up every day with a smile on my face. I wake up every day excited because I have a mission. Like God has a plan for my life, just like He has a plan for all your lives. And I tell people this all the time, if Jesus Christ were to show up right now to those doors with His little Jesus Christ wand, and He came back to me and He said, Brian, we'll go back to May 27, 2000, and I'll make it so none of this ever happened. I'd say, no way. This accident is the best thing that ever happened to me. Now, I'm always reminded of this, one of my favorite stories in the Bible. It's out of Luke chapter 19. It's the story of Zacchaeus. Now, Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector, and one day he found out that Jesus was coming to town, right? And he heard about this guy. He wanted to experience Jesus. So he ends up climbing this sycamore fig tree, right? Just to get a glimpse of him. And Jesus walks by them, he looks up and he spots him. He says, Zacchaeus, you come down from here. Today I'm hanging out at your house. And Jesus goes and he has this interaction with Zacchaeus, and Zacchaeus ends up giving half of his possessions to him. and ultimately ends up giving his life to Christ as well. See, my life is a lot like Zacchaeus' prior to conversion. My life and Zacchaeus' life, this was like before Jesus. It's just like this glass of water. Stagnant. Not much going on there. We're just existing in this world. That's how I was living. Then all of a sudden, the Holy Spirit shows up. This morning, the Holy Spirit is going to be in the form of an Alka-Seltzer. But this is what happens. He enters into our bodies, and a reaction happens. And this is what happened to me, and this is what happened to Zacchaeus, and this is what he wants to happen in all of our lives. Now, maybe you're here today, and it's you,